Westminster and in Heaton Park this evening. Police earlier confirmed the gunmen were father and son Sajid Akram and Naveed Akram. The older man died at the scene while his son is in a critical condition in hospital. Local media reported that 2 Islamic State flags were found in the gunman's car. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said clearly they were motivated by this extremist ideology. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has called on resident doctors to ignore the British Medical Association and abandon the Christmas strikes. His plea comes as resident doctors have voted to reject the government's latest offer on working conditions, meaning nearly half of England's medical workforce will walk out this week. The British Medical Association says a 5-day strike will begin on Wednesday, following months of deadlock over pay and working conditions. Health leaders say it could cause major disruption during the busy winter period, with flu cases already at record levels. Nick Reiner, the son of legendary Hollywood director and actor Rob Reiner, is in custody after Mr. Reiner and his wife Michelle were found dead yesterday. The arrest comes as police continue their investigation after the couple were found in their Los Angeles home. It is understood from police officials that Nick Reiner was charged earlier today. European leaders are hailing significant progress tonight on President Trump's efforts to secure peace for Ukraine. Sir Keir Starmer joined leaders from France, Germany and Italy alongside Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Berlin. The leaders added that they are committed to work together to provide robust security guarantees and economic recovery support measures for Ukraine in the context of an agreement on ending the war. Sticking with foreign affairs, the new chief for MI6 has said that the agency is dealing with an interlocking web of security challenges during her first public speech. Blaise Metroelli highlighted recent sanctions against both Russian and Chinese entities, adding that we are in a space between peace and war. And speaking in the House of Commons tonight, the Foreign Secretary has called for the immediate release of Jimmy Lai after the British national was convicted today. Earlier, the UK condemned the conviction of the 78-year-old pro-democracy activist as a politically motivated prosecution. Mr. Lai now faces a possible life sentence after being found guilty under Hong Kong's Beijing-imposed national security law. Yvette Cooper says she summoned the Chinese ambassador today to outline her position in the strongest possible terms. Those are the latest GBNews headlines. Now let's go back to Jacob.
For all the latest from GB News whilst you're on the go, get the GB News app. Scan the QR code now to download or visit gbnews.com/app.
State of the Nation back. Well, welcome back to State of the Nation. Evil once again stalks the globe. The horrific murders at Bondi Beach outrage us all, just as we thought we were inured to further distress. Innocent people were slaughtered, families were shattered, and a public celebration became a scene of terror, simply because the participants were Jews celebrating Hanukkah. After tragedies like this, we search for answers and causes. We talk about freedom of speech, about radicalization, and about religion. But where discussion of freedom of speech reaches a point of dispute, it is over where freedom ends and incitement to violence begins. Even the most avid of free speech campaigners will draw the line at incitement to violence. But if violence begins after speech that is still legal, speech that expresses anger, grievance or political opposition, should that speech be banned too? It is legal, if in my view incorrect, to say you do not support the State of Israel, or that its founding was an illegitimate seizing of land from existing communities. Equally, it's clearly and rightly illegal to support Hamas, a proscribed terrorist organisation committed to eliminating Jews and dissenters through the most extreme violence. Article 7 of the Hamas Covenant of 1988 says, "The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews. The stones and trees will say, O Muslims, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." Article 15 states, "The day that enemies usurp part of Muslim land, jihad becomes the individual duty of every Muslim. In face of the Jews' usurpation of Palestine, it is compulsory that the banner of jihad be raised." Does the belief in the former principle inevitably lead to the second? Does holding a divisive political view lead someone to pick up a gun and kill strangers simply because they are Jews or of a different religion? Billions of people hold strong political and religious beliefs and never commit violence. The step from belief to violence and murder is not inevitable. It is a moral choice. Since the Bondi attack and others, including the Heaton Park synagogue attack, attention has quickly turned to Islam. Is Islam compatible with Western society? Can Islam ever be peaceful? Is it a threat to the West itself? The latter was committed by an Islamist terrorist, and the gunman in the former pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. The vast majority of terror incidents that have occurred in the West in the past few decades have been driven by Islamic extremism. So does the Quran incite violence? Well, the Quran contains passages such as, "So when you meet the disbelievers in battle, strike their necks until you have thoroughly subdued them, then bind them firmly, and those who disbelieve in our verses, we will drive them into a fire. Every time their skins are roasted through, we will replace them with other skins so they may taste the punishment." But the Old Testament and the Bible contains passages such as, "Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant." Both texts contain violent language, and yet billions of Jews, Christians and Muslims read these books without any desire to harm anybody. We do not ban the Bible because most people understand that ancient texts are read with context, ethics and restraint. The problem is not speech or scriptures alone, it's actions. Debates can be had about the compatibility of Islam in Western societies. Former Prime Minister of Australia, Tony Abbott, said this following the attack.
Some versions of Islam are not really compatible with life in a liberal, democratic, pluralist society. Strict versions of Islam are not consistent with, for argument's sake, freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, democracy. You can believe in the virgin birth and still support liberal democracy.
However, Mr. Abbott also told the BBC this.
In Australia, and indeed in quite a few other countries, including Britain, there has been far too much tolerance of anti-Jewish hate speech. We haven't banned hate marches. We haven't prosecuted people for saying that the Jewish people of Israel should effectively suffer a new Holocaust. And if you hate them enough, we see atrocities like that we witnessed at Bondi Beach.
The pro-Palestinian marches we have seen almost every weekend since the 7th of October 2023 have been beset by ugly scenes, pro-Hamas and ISIS flags, anti-Semitic chants and outright attacks on Jews in the street. This is rightly punishable by law, and those who commit these acts must be held accountable. In my view, where Tony Abbott goes too far is by suggesting that clamping down on these marches you would deter the evil Islamists dedicated to violence who carried out these despicable acts. Importantly, the person who bravely intervened and disarmed the attacker, or one of the attackers, is a Muslim of Syrian descent. Ahmed al-Ahmed, a 43-year-old fruit shop owner and father of two, went and attacked the gunman, wrestling away his weapon and forcing his retreat. He was shot multiple times for his bravery. His father said Ahmed was driven by sentiment, conscience and humanity. As always, let me know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. Well, I'm joined now by the Director of Legislative Affairs at the Free Speech Union, Sam Armstrong, and my panel, John Redwood and Matthew Stadlen. Thank you very much for coming in this evening. It's very hard to defend free speech when free speech seems to be at the beginning of a process that leads to people shooting innocent people of a different religion.
Absolutely. But as ever, we have to focus on precisely what has occurred here. And in my view, banning the so-called speech that led this individual or these individuals to commit the heinous acts of violence they did is just as silly, just as foolish, just as puerile as banning them from holding the guns that they did, or banning people from holding guns, which is to say that actually these individuals shot and killed a 10-year-old girl, an 84-year-old Holocaust survivor, because they hold a deep-seated, awful, tremendously evil sense that they wish to commit violence towards others deeply within themselves. And the idea that the idea that banning other people from speaking is any more likely to end violence than banning ordinary Australians, ordinary Brits from owning and possessing guns, is just as silly. In actual fact, what we need to do is be very clear that there are, regrettably, tens of thousands of people in our society that hold views that it is acceptable to shoot and fire weapons at Jews for no other reasons than they are Jewish.
But is the comparison with the guns that foolish? Because if you look at gun crime in the UK, it is much lower than in the US because we have very tight gun control. If we could stop these attacks by being less tolerant, do you think that would be a price worth paying?
Well, firstly, we should be clear. There are 70-odd million people in the United Kingdom, the vast majority of whom have been able to withstand the ordinary debates of free speech for 2 millennia or more. Secondly, there is no evidence whatsoever that restraining speech does anything to constrain extreme ideas. In fact, where there is evidence, it is pointed in the other direction. Never forget, the Weimar Republic had amongst the toughest restrictions on free speech of anywhere in the Western world, and that led directly to the emergence of Nazi ideology. And thirdly, there is no reason whatsoever, in my view, to engage in the summary ending of ancient and precious freedoms at a time in which you are admitting millions of people over a period of a decade or more who simply don't believe in these ideas without having first attempted to deal with mass migration into this country.
Matthew, do you think that Tony Abbott is right, that if there'd been a tougher approach to the marches, it is less likely that these things would have happened?
Very difficult to say, but what I would say is that we know that radicalisation can take place in people's bedrooms. So access to the internet, when you are vulnerable in the way that someone who carries out horrific acts of evil is, access to the internet can be incredibly dangerous.
So what is the answer? Because it's going to be almost impossible to limit people's access to the internet unless you go down the route of totalitarian regimes. So Iran and China can do that, but the British state would find that almost impossible. How do you try and deal with this problem at its root causes?
It's very, very difficult to regulate the internet. And we've seen that, particularly, I would suggest, since the emergence of Elon Musk as the owner of one of the primary digital public spaces. It seems to me to be a free-for-all to such an extent. There's so much hatred, so much racism, so much homophobia, so much anti-Semitism, so much misogyny. The vast swathes of users have left the platform or no longer really use it. My view is quite clear, though. We have laws in this country. You cannot, as you've already said, incite violence. You cannot, and this has been the case for some time, incite racial hatred. You cannot incite religious hatred. And by the way, that is about people. It's not about criticising religion, which is fundamental, I think, to our democracy, the ability to criticise ideas. But these things have been in place for some time. Where we found it incredibly difficult is with the emergence of the internet, where there are millions of day-to-day users who, many of whom simply do not obey the law.
John, Matthew raises a point that I think is very important, that you can talk about the individuals but should protect freedom of religion. I spent a bit of time this afternoon reading the Bible, and you look through and you find there are some terrible things in the Bible. Of course, infamously, the blood libel, his blood be on our heads and on the heads of our children in the end of Matthew's Gospel, but much harsher things as well in the Old Testament. How do you differentiate between the individual and the religion? Because it seems to me that lots of people start blaming Islam rather than evil people.
I think as the law intends to do, and I think we have a law enforcement problem more than we have an inadequacy of law problem. And Matthew's rightly pointed out the offences, and we know people are committing them a lot of the time, a limited minority, and they are encouraging people to disrupt our societies in the way that we've tragically seen in Australia. So I think you go after the hate preachers. If hate preachers are applying to get in this country, we need to do a better job on saying, no, you're not a suitable person to come or even to visit. Where we've got our own hate preachers already here, they should be investigated. And if they are deliberately perverting youth by saying it is the right thing to do to pursue anti-Semitism to the point of violence, then they should be prosecuted. Prevent is the strategy. We want it to be more successful. And I think it's cross-party. I think Labour and Conservative both agree that these outrageous acts are terrorist acts. They are serious crimes. And the instruction or the mentoring of these people are also crimes. We need to tackle it. And we need to watch where people are going to a foreign country to train, because when they come back into our country, that is the point where we ought to be taking criminal action against them.
So part of the problem is immigration, and we need a tighter immigration policy to know
Yes,
who
you've got to
is coming in.
selectively through your intelligence. And I know there are hundreds or thousands of possible people, so you're going to need quite a bit of resource. There is already quite a lot of resource. But you've also got the advantage now of fast search and AI and all the rest of it, so you should be able to see movements electronically.
So Matthew, to what extent do you think the technology that makes this possible also makes it possible to police?
We've had a massive backlash in recent months, in fact, really since this government came into power, against Keir Starmer's Labour government. And that has been including suggestions that it is almost totalitarian, that is anti-free speech. Actually, as I think I've correctly identified, we are in relatively new territory, which is that people can say things much more easily in public because of their access to digital media, to social media platforms. But the law does still apply on those platforms, and it's incredibly important to make that point. By the way, on mass immigration...
I just want to give Sam the last word, because we're about to come to conclusion. Do you broadly agree with what Matthew's been saying, that actually we have got laws that can protect us, and we should be using those properly, even if they do stop people saying things that, though free speech, go beyond a certain level?
Well, where I agree is that I think Tony Abbott is wrong, that actually the legislation that we have is perfectly adequate. And insofar as it has deficiencies, it is in the wrong direction. Remember where stirring up hatred offences have led. It's Jamie Michael, a former Royal Marine, that was wrongly prosecuted for stirring up racial hatred for a perfectly innocent Facebook post. Where I do think we do have a problem is around the mass importation of individuals that hold a view that it is acceptable, or at least understandable, that you might want to shoot at, in a mass level, Jewish people in our country. And where I see a problem is the continued false compassion that comes about where you import people by virtue of the fact they break into our country illegally without any sense of who they are.
And ignoring the freedoms of Jews to lead a decent life here.
Thank you very much. Well, we've got a poll. In today's poll, we've been asking, in light of the horrific attack on Bondi Beach, can religious extremism ever be stopped? Well, so far, 63% of you say no, and 37% of you have voted yes. There's a QR code you can look at in a moment.
It's incredibly important that we tell China and Hong Kong that our values are not up for trade. The freedom of our people will never be up for trade.
A Chinese court in Hong Kong, a puppet for the Communist Party, has found media tycoon and pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai guilty of colluding with foreign forces, which could see him jailed for life. Mr. Lai's son joins me shortly to discuss his father's ordeal.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
People are getting married less because, society has changed. People are simply becoming more secular. And because they're becoming more secular, they don't view that marriage is a divine religious institution. And that more and more people have turned away from God, and because they've turned away from God, they don't view, the institution that has been the bedrock of society. So society has changed. People have moved away from religion or organized religion, and they just don't view it as a bedrock of religious religious growth. People don't think getting right with the Lord Jesus or having a pastor in their life as part of their marriage. Also, younger people today care more about their careers. They care more about financial stability. They care more about, having their own lives and their freedom than traditional marriage than it used to be. So it's just a big change of society today.
And Charlie Downs, does that matter? Are there negatives to being focused on career and choosing to shack up as opposed to get married in church?
Very much so. I mean, I like to think that I am slightly swimming against the tide because, there we go, I got married at the beginning of last month, and I'm 24.
Aww.
And the last time that the average age of marriage in this country was 24 was 60 years ago. The average age of marriage now is about 33 years old, which is a historic high. And I think this is largely because of the reasons that Pastor Mark outlined just now, which is that we don't actually understand as young people what marriage is.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hong Kong media tycoon and pro-democracy figure Jimmy Lai has been found guilty of conspiring to collude with foreign forces which could see him sentenced to life in prison. Collusion charges fall under Hong Kong's national security law imposed by China in 2020, which led to protests across the nation. Mr. Lai, a 78-year-old British citizen, founded the now-defunct Apple Daily, which was one of the only publications in Hong Kong that was ever critical of the Chinese Communist Party's rule. Jimmy Lai's ordeal is the latest in a series of human rights abuses over freedom of speech and the press, committed by the Chinese government in breach of the joint declaration with the UK when Hong Kong went to China in 1997. Well, I'm now joined by Jimmy Lai's son, Sebastian. Sebastian, first of all, thank you for coming in. Secondly, how is your father? What is his health like? What are the conditions he's being kept in?
Unfortunately, his health has gotten much worse and it's rapidly deteriorating. In the last year alone, he's lost 10 kilos. Look, this is no surprise. This is a 78-year-old man that's being kept in solitary confinement. 14 days of solitary confinement is considered prolonged solitary confinement. He's been there for 1,800 days, hundreds of times that. This is a tiny little cell with no air conditioning. In the summers, Hong Kong routinely goes above 33 degrees Celsius, which is considered extremely hot. And essentially, with his window shut off, he essentially bakes in a cell. So he's got rashes all over his body, he's bleeding, he's got muscle infections, and all of that has obviously caused heart issues.
And he is a British citizen. He fled from Mao, got into Hong Kong. Shouldn't he have some protection from the British government?
Indeed, he's only a British citizen. In fact, when he left Communist China as a stowaway when he was 11, the United Kingdom, which then colonized Hong Kong, was the first state to recognize him as a person. So he's only ever held British papers. Yeah, look, I think we're in a situation now where if more isn't done, he will very well die in prison.
And the British government handed Hong Kong back to the Chinese government with an agreement that Hong Kong would carry on with freedom of speech and freedom of association for 50 years. We're nowhere near 50 years, we're 28 years from that agreement coming into force. Why does China feel it can ignore its international commitments so gratuitously?
I think China has done so because they don't feel like there's any consequences to their actions. And a perfect example is in the persecution of my father. We were very, very happy to see that the Foreign Secretary and the government issue such a strong call in today, which he received a guilty verdict. But it's about putting words to action. It's about putting preconditions. If you want a closer relationship to China, the least that Hong Kong and China can do is to release Jimmy Lai.
And we have got some cards to play. Not many, because China's much bigger than we are, but China wants a large embassy in London. That's the sort of thing we should be saying, isn't it? You can't have a large embassy in China unless you release Jimmy Lai and treat British citizens properly.
So that's one example, the visit, the upcoming prime ministerial visit as well. Again, all these are signs of warming of relationship, of normalising a relationship is what the government would use. And, we will never normalise what's happening to my father. We will never normalise the British citizen getting arbitrarily detained for any reasons. Never mind standing up for freedom and democracy and for his employees.
And your father is an important symbol, isn't he? Because the Apple Daily stood up for the people of Hong Kong. When I lived in Hong Kong, it was before the handover, so it was still a British colony. And the Apple Daily was famous for being on the side of its readers in a way that no other publication was. Most of the others were quite sort of official in their tone.
Yeah.
And it carried on doing that into the communist era.
Yeah.
And now, in total breach of the Joint Declaration, the Apple Daily is being closed down. Those rights have been denied not just your father, but the people of Hong Kong more broadly.
Yeah, exactly. My father founded the Apple Daily with the belief that information is choice and choice was freedom. So for him and his journalists, it was exhilarating to give the choice to have this information on the newsstand for every single Hong Kong person every single day. And that's what him and his colleagues did for the last 20, 30 years. And indeed, when they raided it, you saw many people, Hong Kong people, line up to buy the editions of Apple Daily to show support. And I still remember someone being interviewed in the line, and the person asked him something along the lines of, look, are you still buying Apple Daily now that you know that it's basically been almost outlawed? And he turns around and looks at him and says, even if it was a blank piece of paper, I would still buy it.
But because of that principle that it's defending freedom of speech.
Because it's defending freedom of speech, defending democracy.
It does beg the question, what is the Chinese government so frightened of about freedom of speech? What is it they think may be said that will do them so much damage?
I think in my father's case, the Hong Kong government sold this story to the Chinese government, that he is some kind of anti-China force, that he's a person who was black hand behind the protest. It's been 5 years. All the evidence has been presented. None of that obviously turned out to be true. Mm-hmm. In fact, my father is someone who loves Hong Kong, because otherwise you wouldn't sacrifice all your wealth or your time and indeed his life to defend the freedoms of the place. You wouldn't, if he was a bad person, he wouldn't have stayed to protect his employees and protect other pro-democracy protesters. And not only was he not a black hand behind the protest, he always campaigned for democracy peacefully and did it in public. But it turns out, through the trial, we know that he also did that in private. So not only does the evidence not criminate him, in fact, it exonerates him. It shows him to this real hero.
And Hong Kong used to have proper justice. What has happened to Hong Kong's justice?
In my father's case, you will see a weaponization of the legal system. Look, he's finally getting his verdict after being arrested on New Year's Eve of 2020. There's an 800-page judgment, but essentially 100 pages of nothing, all relating to his newspaper and his journalism.
One country, two systems is no longer there, is it? It's one country, one communist system, one communist justice system that has sentenced or has held a man for 5 years for freedom of speech offences and may hold him indefinitely.
Yeah, I think the Hong Kong that you would have known, the Hong Kong with a strong rule of law, it has completely disappeared. This is an example of how the legal system has been weaponized against my father and other pro-democracy protesters.
Well, I think all my viewers will wish your father well and will be praying for his safety and for his release, and I hope that his faith is giving him some comfort, particularly at Christmas. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much to Sebastian. In a moment, is Labour on the verge of an irreparable split? Tensions are rising after Ian Murray publicly criticised Sir Keir Starmer following his sacking as Scottish Secretary. Is Labour on the brink of another crisis?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast. It's not just the UK that's seeing unsettled conditions at the moment. Many western and central areas of the Mediterranean are also experiencing a mixture of heavy rain, thunderstorms, even some hail snow in locations. Gales pushing their way through the Gibraltar Strait and other coastal regions as well. Some areas may see 100 to 150 millimetres of rain, significantly above their December average. It's eastern areas around Greece and the Balkans that will stay driest, though, if you are heading out at all.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Through tonight, it will turn drier and clearer across north and western areas finally, but the rain will push into more eastern areas of England. That's because this weather front is slowly but surely shifting its way eastwards through the rest of today. And behind it, we've got a ridge of slightly higher pressure moving in. So still some wet weather to come, particularly for northeastern England overnight tonight. And that rain will push into eastern areas of England, becoming a weaker feature, but still bringing some rain. Much drier night across many western and northern areas. We could see a touch of frost across parts of Northern Ireland, so a much chillier start here. And for most of us, it will be a more widely colder night tonight. There will also be a little bit of mist and fog around to start the day on Tuesday, particularly across anywhere we've had a lot of rain recently. Parts of southwest England, much of Wales seeing a much brighter start to the day. Some sunshine around. The further north and west you go, the brighter skies become. But as you move over towards western Scotland, there's a risk of showers, some of these falling as snow just over the highest mountains of the Highlands, for example. Clearer skies, though, across more eastern areas of Scotland. So a fairly bright and dry start to the day, certainly much nicer than it has been lately. But the cloud will linger across more eastern areas of England through much of the day. Actually, the rain could come and go, particularly across the far southeast. Elsewhere, though, a dry, bright, and for some of us, quite a sunny day. It's going to be a slightly fresher feel out there. Temperatures much closer to average for the time of year, around 8 or 9 degrees across many southern areas. Now, the dry weather doesn't last long, as we've got the next batch of rain moving in from the northwest on Wednesday. And as it moves into parts of South Wales, southwestern England, where we've had a lot of rain recently, there is another rain warning in force here. We could see further flooding issues and travel disruptions. It looks quite unsettled into Thursday as well as the weekend. So please stay tuned to the forecast, as there is a risk of flooding. Bye-bye.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. So what is going on inside the Labour Party? Are we on the verge of an irreversible split down the middle of the government? The senior minister, Ian Murray, has publicly criticised the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, after being sacked of Scotland's secretary and not getting a proper explanation. Meanwhile, rumours of leadership plots continue as Andy Burnham is reportedly close to sealing the deal on a by-election plan. With Labour slipping in the polls and crucial elections on the horizon, is Labour on the brink of a crisis? Well, my panel is here. And Matthew, I'll let you have the first word.
Sir John Redwood, soon to be Lord Redwood, is surely the expert on this, challenging the leader.
Well, Conservatives know quite a lot about splits, so it gives us certain expertise. But I can't remember a serving minister previously giving an interview saying, I don't understand why I was demoted, the Prime Minister doesn't know what he's doing, and he hasn't got any manners. I mean, this is very odd, isn't it?
Extremely peculiar. You can imagine the conversations that must be going on behind the scenes. I'm slightly more... I mean, look, if that is suggestive of a wider loss of authority within government and the Parliamentary Labour Party more generally, then that's obviously extremely concerning for Keir Starmer. If this is just a bizarre rogue interview, then so be it. But the background is the Andy Burnham stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a bit the Wes Streeting stuff. And I don't think it was wildly helpful of Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, last week to start talking about the challenges of being a technocratic government. I mean, he is part of that government. Yes. And he knows full well, doesn't he, that there's speculation as to whether he might be the next Labour leader, the next Prime Minister. The Andy Burnham stuff, I just find so clumsy. I mean, on the one hand, you might say, well, good for him for sort of being relatively open about it, rather than cloak and daggers. I mean, John Redwood was very open about it when he challenged John Major in
I didn't challenge him. I responded to Major saying he wanted a competition. That is very different. I was very well behaved before he decided to have a challenge.
But you were certainly not cloak and daggers, is my point. And look, just seeing Andy Burnham apparently really wanting to become Prime Minister, it inevitably comes across as being about him. Whereas actually what I think this government should be doing, and admittedly Andy Burnham is not part of the government, is just get on with governing and learn, for goodness sakes, the lessons of your party and the merry-go-round Piccadilly circus that we had for those 6 years.
Burnham does seem a bit of an amateur, doesn't he? Also treating the electorate slightly contemptuously, saying, oh, I'll just find a by-election, it'll be fine. Well, voters actually have to vote for you.
No, I think he would take an enormous risk and could do the Labour Party even more damage, and he's already done it, and do himself a lot of damage, because why would people in a by-election be grateful when their Labour MP who'd pledged 5 years good service had walked out in under 2 years, and then they just expect to transfer the vote to somebody with a huge ego who wants to get rid of the Prime Minister? I think he could easily discover he didn't win that, and everybody would be in a far worse position, and Labour would be even lower in the polls.
Don't forget that Andy Burnham was beaten by Jeremy Corbyn when he ran for the leadership before. Or am I imagining that? Was he beaten by...
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
But look, there are obvious barriers to him anyway. One is that he'd have to be selected in the first place, and it wouldn't exactly be in Starmer's interest to say, yes, nod him through. And the second is reform will be coming for him. Nigel Farage has already made that clear. I mean, that will be one... If he does stand in a by-election, that will be one hell of a battle.
But Ian Murphy does seem to indicate the breakdown in discipline, that junior ministers... It's one thing, big beast saying, I'd like to be Prime Minister. When a junior, I mean, he's a senior junior minister, but you know what I mean, starts saying, well, the Prime Minister's hopeless, and there are no consequences. I mean, I assume he's been called in by the Chief Whip, but normally, if you gave that sort of interview, you wouldn't expect a lasting government.
The Prime Minister should have sorted that out with him when he sacked him, for goodness sake, and they normally agree a text.
It's the sort of thing you might see in a comedy or the thick of it, or Spitting Image or something, which is why I question whether this is really a sign of Starmer losing authority. It just seems such a bizarre thing to happen.
But it shows he's so incompetent, because I mean, if he'd said to the guy, I'm sorry, I've got to let you stand aside for the moment, but don't worry, you've got a future in our party, and here is a letter saying nice things about you. Now you send me a letter saying nice things about me. That's what would normally happen.
But he is still in the government, isn't
he?
Well, he is still in the government, isn't he?
But he got demoted. Well, he was fired and then he was reappointed. Right. It was rather clumsy reshuffle. Everything seems so clumsy. Everything that can go wrong does go wrong.
There are certainly... We all know that there are issues with this government, and we know what's going on in the polls. And I would suggest that one of the issues is that they weren't properly ready for government. Okay. I think there is a school of thought that Keir Starmer was the accidental Prime Minister because not that many people thought he could turn it around so quickly.
We're going to be moving on, but does he last to Easter or May?
Listen, he should last until the cusp of the next election.
All right. Easter or May?
I think he may stagger on for longer because the challengers probably aren't as popular even as he is.
He is.
If he doesn't sort it out, then fine, have a leadership challenge going into the next election to take Farage on. You can't go in with the polls as they are and his personal ratings as they are. Don't do it now.
All right, I think you should do an Andy Burnham, find a by-election. You'd be much better. Anyway, in a moment...
Investment and growth must be built and felt in every part of our United Kingdom.
Britain's economy is stuck in a doom loop of decline following pre-budget contractions, escalating unfunded welfare spending and fears over tax rise and interest rates. Government says its plan will work. How does the UK get growth going again?
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain is in a doom loop of decline. The economy shrunk unexpectedly in the weeks leading up to Rachel Reeves' budget. Growth has stalled. Businesses and consumers are hesitating to spend, and concerns are growing over tax rises, unfunded welfare spending and interest rates. The government insists it's all going swimmingly and that the plan will work and things can only get better in the long term. But with GDP falling and pressure building on the Bank of England to cut interest rates, what needs to happen to get the economy growing again? Well, my panel is still with me, but also the Shadow Business Secretary, Andrew Griffith. Andrew, thank you for coming in. Are the Conservatives prepared to be radical enough to do what needs to be done to get the economy growing again, to tackle welfare expenditure, to have the supply side reforms, to shake things up in a way that hasn't been done really since 1979?
Yes, we are, Jacob. It's both the men and the measures. The new team is working well together. It is a team and it's united in its purpose. But also, if you look at some of the policies, and I accept that, you know, at the moment they're still in the gestation stage, we have already promised to scrap every piece of green tape that's been tying up British companies. Today in the House of Commons, we voted against Labour's 330-page red tape employment bill that's going to make it almost impossible for businesses to viably employ people. And this morning, Kemi announced that we will move back to a world of people being able to choose the vehicle of their choice. No more top-down central government diktats about which car you will and won't buy and putting subsidies into those. That'll help our automotive industry, by by the way. It'll help Europe's automotive industry compete globally. But it'll also, once again, mean that the burden of state spending and red tape is eased. So I think we are. And there's a lot of work to do. This is a great country, but there is a lot of work to do to get us growing again.
So if you were Business Secretary run shadow, you would repeal the employment rights bill that's come in.
Correct.
Total.
We will.
And cheap energy. How do you get to cheap energy with the deadweight costs that there already are on the subsidies that have been promised for our extraordinarily expensive nuclear programme, but also for all the wind farms?
Well, like in a lot of areas, to be honest, stop digging. This government is digging at great pace, getting ourselves into more of a hole, adding more liabilities, putting more costs on things like the grid that we're all having to eat, and businesses are going offshore. Not all of that happened on the 5th of July, 2024. So I acknowledge, mistakes that the Conservatives made, but we've moved on from that. We're a different team, and we're unafraid to confront some of the hard truths that this country faces now. So cheaper energy is absolutely part of it, but so is lower taxes. And from where you started, there's no point, and people all my life have said we're going to lower taxes, and they never do. You've got to start with the spending side of the equation. You've got to be able to be willing to make some really tough decisions on welfare. I was a finance director for 12 years. You don't become wildly popular, when you're telling people there isn't the money that they want for their own individual ideas or whatever. But that's the sort of discipline it's going to take to get to grips with welfare, to cut back the size of the state, all of these arm's length agencies. That's what we've got to do to try and free up the capacity to cut taxes and get the state off people's backs.
OK, so one of the biggest costs continuing is the triple lock. Is that under review, at risk, or is that still set in stone?
Well, Jacob, it isn't actually one of the biggest costs. It's a relatively small part of an overall welfare budget that's going to reach 400 billion a year by the end of this.
Pensions are about half of that. And
pensions in aggregate, but not the difference between the double lock, if you like, or the triple lock. So people always turn.
But are you thinking of a double lock rather than a triple lock?
I'm thinking the biggest single opportunity, look, if you've got limited time and energy, the biggest single opportunity to reform welfare, and the fairest, by the way, is those of working age. Yes. Those who still have the opportunity, who aren't locked in to a fixed income, but who've got the opportunity to make changes in their lives with our support by freeing up the jobs market, by having a supply-side revolution, but also by making sure we've got a welfare system that incentivises them to be in work rather than out of work.
The two-child limit?
We would restore the two-child limit as part of a series of measures that mean it should never be better off to be on welfare than in work. So there are at the moment places in the welfare state where that is the case.
Benefits won't go up in line with inflation.
Look, what they certainly shouldn't do is benefits shouldn't be an entitlement that always only ever go up. At the moment, for example, we've got this mismatch when it comes to incentives for people to work. Tax thresholds are not going up in line with inflation. So each year, your take-home income is reducing a little bit, but welfare benefits in the benefit street budget the Chancellor put forward are going up with inflation. That just tilts those incentives, so that is not right. Of course, inflation, as I think you would agree, is too high anyway. So if you get inflation down, you get rid of a lot of these things.
Would you reverse the mansion tax?
Look, I'm not going to rewrite, tempting though I am, I'm not going to rewrite the budget. We would not have come up with the mansion tax. As it happens, I've been surveying my constituents on the mansion tax over the last few weeks. There's a high propensity for people to appeal. If you haven't transacted in your property, the idea that the state's going to come in and tell you what you think your property is worth and then you be taxed on the basis of that is a very hard thing to implement.
There's one school of thought which is you just leave it to the markets effectively and get the state out of it. What Labour has realised, what your party failed to realise for too long, is that the state needs to invest in infrastructure, and Labour has heavily invested in infrastructure. Of course you need private business, of course you need small businesses, of course you need all of that good stuff. But if you have crumbling education estate, crumbling health estate, have you been to hospitals lately? If you have crumbling transport, you need all this stuff in order for small businesses and big businesses to drive the economy forward.
Well,
Labour has invested heavily, hasn't it?
I'm going to summarise that Labour's going to get us out of a debt trap by spending even more money that we don't have. Anyway, finally, this is good news. The prize that's been awaited with bated breath, the State of the Nation Christmas Jumper Prize, which goes to Maria, whose picture I hope is going to appear on screen now. She actually produces this programme and she wins because I think her jersey is more politically sound than a jersey that I would dream of wearing. So, Maria, congratulations on your splendid Make Orwell Fiction Again with a picture of an eye jersey. That's all from me. Next, it's Alex Armstrong in for Patrick Christie's. Alex, I haven't mentioned Somerset much this evening, so will you make up the deficit?
Jacob, I will absolutely do my best to do that for you this evening. Coming up on the show, Nigel Farage has slammed an NHS green light by the Health Secretary to experiment on children, which could lead to hundreds of them being sterilised. He's called it state-sponsored abuse. We're going to expose that on this show this evening. And do you remember the senator from Australia who wore the burqa in Parliament? Well, she's going to be joining me this evening to talk about the terror threat to the West. We've got loads more also coming up on the show, including Reform UK's plans to slash the blob in Westminster. That's all coming up on Patrick Christie's Tonight.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Through tonight, it will turn drier and clearer across north and western areas finally, but the rain will push into more eastern areas of England. That's because this weather front is slowly but surely shifting its way eastwards through the rest of today, and behind it, we've got a ridge of slightly higher pressure moving in. So still some wet weather to come, particularly for northeastern England overnight tonight, and that rain will push into eastern areas of England, becoming a weaker feature, but still bringing some rain. Much drier night across many western and northern areas. We could see a touch of frost across parts of Northern Ireland, so a much chillier start here. And for most of us, it will be a more widely colder night tonight. There will also be a little bit of mist and fog around to start the day on Tuesday, particularly across anywhere we've had a lot of rain recently. Parts of southwest England, much of Wales seeing a much brighter start to the day. Some sunshine around. The further north and west you go, the brighter skies become. But as you move over towards western Scotland, there's a risk of showers, some of these falling as snow just over the highest mountains of the Highlands, for example. Clearer skies, though, across more eastern areas of Scotland. So a fairly bright and dry start to the day, certainly much nicer than it has been lately. But the cloud will linger across more eastern areas of England through much of the day. Actually, the rain could come and go, particularly across the far southeast. Elsewhere, though, a dry, bright, and for some of us, quite a sunny day. It's going to be a slightly fresher feel out there. Temperatures much closer to average for the time of year, around 8 or 9 degrees across many southern areas. Now, the dry weather doesn't last long, as we've got the next batch of rain moving in from the northwest on Wednesday. And as it moves into parts of South Wales, southwestern England, where we've had a lot of rain recently, there is another rain warning in force here. We could see further flooding issues and travel disruption. It looks quite unsettled into Thursday as well as the weekend. So please stay tuned to the forecast, as there is a risk of flooding. Bye-bye.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's the big one. Your chance to win a whopping £85,000 in tax-free cash. The largest cash prize we've given away to date. That's like over £7,000 a month extra in your bank account each month for 12 whole months. That's a year of yes. Yes to holidays, yes to treats, yes to shopping trips, yes to home improvements. For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686